Welcome to Beyond the Barrier, navigating Gaza's blockade and its humanitarian impact. In today's episode, we'll look into how the blockade in Gaza impacts the work of humanitarian providers, constraining the delivery of essential resources, and complicating aid efforts in one of the world's most restricted environments.
My name is Yangziyan, and I'm joined by my colleagues Georgia Ross, Eeman Gilani, and Yashica. We're students at the Geneva Graduate Institute, and this podcast was created as part of our Human Rights and Humanitarianism through the Concepts course.
We wanted to create a space for voices often absent from mainstream Western media, specifically hearing from the people on the ground in Gaza, as well as getting insights from experts who navigate the humanitarian complexities of the blockade.
Today, we'll discuss the day-to-day realities faced by those delivering aid, from the logistical challenges to the human cost. Joining us today are Jeet Sangir from the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights and Asma Taha, a healthcare volunteer in Gaza.
To understand the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, we first need to define what a blockade is. A blockade is a military or political tactic used to prevent goods, services, and people from entering or leaving a specific area. Historically, blockades have been used to control territories, but in Gaza, impact goes far beyond control. It restricts basic necessities like food, electricity, and medicine, creating a devastating state of exception. This state of exception means that normal rights are suspended under the guise of security.
This has devastating consequences, particularly on healthcare, with shortages in critical medical supplies and personnel. The delivery of care becomes nearly impossible. The International Court of Justice has referred to these conditions as catastrophic, jeopardizing the future health of Palestinian generations.
Blockades also raise critical legal and ethical questions. Scholars like Tom Dannenbaum argue that the withholding of food, fuel, and medicine could be considered starvation as a method of warfare, a violation of international humanitarian law. The ICC recently linked the hindering of humanitarian assistance to starvation as a war crime and highlighted violations of the right to health as a potential crime against humanity, which is a crucial point we'll unpack further.
As we discuss the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, I think it's also crucial to connect these immediate realities to broader legal frameworks. When we think about history, blockades have been used to control territories, but today, especially in Gaza, I think they go much further. The concept of the blockade must be understood not only as a logistical constraint, but as a systematic structure that perpetrates dependency and hinders agency. This brings up one of the themes we're going to discuss: how blockades intertwine with legal accountability and systematic deprivation.
Yeah, and what is interesting to notice that because of this blockade, the humanitarian aid that is coming through is under the lens of Israel and fully allowed to pass through, creating a circle of deficiency.
To receive insights into the concept of blockade and its impact on humanitarian aid in Gaza, we had the opportunity to interview two experts, Ajit Sange and Asma Taha. Ajit joins us from OHCHR, where he serves as the head of the UN Human Rights Office in the occupied Palestinian territory, and Asma is a healthcare professional who has volunteered in Gaza, providing life saving medical care despite overwhelming shortages and the constant threat of violence.
The blockades are blockades. I don't think that, I mean, there are two different kinds of, checkpoints. I mean, the checkpoints by the IDF, that's not where we face problems with. A lot of these people are also civilians, frustrated. They have no food, they will jump on anything that comes. That's the reality on ground. There's no law and order. So that's one thing. I mean, whether you want to call it misappropriation or if it's self, distribution for desperate people, that's we can discuss it. But that's one thing. Are Palestinian armed groups taking some of the aid? Possibly. How much? I don't think it's so much that it's a separate category of problems that we have discussed, compared to other conflicts, for instance. So I mean, the bigger issue is looting that happens because of lawlessness, and I can see, the energetic people jumping on a truck and pulling things and then taking away, leaving the others, for instance, women, children, disabled people, or elderly, left out of the humanitarian.
Exactly. This highlights the dual challenges of physical restrictions and social breakdowns. The blockade not only impedes aid but also worsens desperations, creating a circle of lawlessness. It's crucial to consider how systematic deprivation can undermine societal structures and perpetuate inequalities.
It is possible. I mean, I will refer you to the statement of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, that was released 2-3 days ago, and it particularly talks about the north of Gaza, and it's among others. Of course, it talks about the bombardment. It talks about massive displacement, but also it talks about the hurdles that are placed in humanitarian aid that is being tried to be delivered in the north. There he does sort of allude. Of course, we are not a court, so we don't completely conclude that it's war crimes against humanity, or so on and so forth. But with nuances, he has warned that such actions may amount to atrocity crimes, including crimes against humanity.
Yes, so it is clear that accessibility was a huge point of emphasis in this conversation. The Israeli Defense Forces' strict control over movement means that even if supplies reach Gaza, they aren't guaranteed to get to the areas where they are most needed. It's interesting to think about how the blockade by the IDF not only impedes aid, but also likely has a psychological impact on the people of Gaza who desperately need it.
Absolutely, and these observations underline a critical point. The blockade's impact extends beyond logistics to erode trust in systems. The legal ramifications of these conditions, potentially identified as crimes against humanity, merit urgent attention.
And in Gaza, lawlessness and desperation have led to aid being looted by civilians, with reports of young, frustrated people taking matters into their own hands. Ajit mentioned that looting is a reality because there's no law, and food scarcity only fuels these tensions. This brings us to a critical question. What does this mean for humanitarian aid workers on the ground? How does the blockade affect their ability to do their jobs effectively? There's the immediate need for aid, but also the ethical dilemma of distribution. If the aid doesn't always reach the most vulnerable populations like children, the elderly, or women, can we say that what we're doing is enough just to get it to the people, even if we control who gets it?
It's a tough question, and it really makes us think about the ethical implications. While humanitarian aid serves an urgent need, we have to ask, is it enough to just distribute aid when we don't have a say in who receives it, specifically when what comes in is regulated by the Israeli authorities? The reality is that humanitarian workers are left in a difficult position. The aid is needed, but it may be distributed in ways that undermine the goals of ensuring it reaches those who need it the most.
Along those same lines, we asked Ajit if he thought that deliberately blocking aid could amount to a crime against humanity. I found his response intriguing. He didn't necessarily agree with the idea, but he pointed out that it might fit within the category of atrocity crimes under certain legal interpretations. The legal dimensions of this conflict is fascinating to me, especially given the debates we've been having in our courses. How does the blockade fit into international law? Could it be framed as a crime against humanity or an atrocious crime? If it were recognized as such, might it help generate accountability and lead to faster resolutions?
That's an interesting thought. If the blockade was legally categorized as an atrocity, perhaps it would help create a sense of urgency for international action. We are seeing firsthand how the lack of international pressure and accountability has allowed the situation to persist for so long. As Ajit said, influential states could and should do more. When political considerations outweigh humanitarian needs, we are left with massive gaps in aid delivery and no real accountability. That brings us back to the role of the global community. How can we expect accountability when powerful states stay silent or refuse to enforce the humanitarian norms they have enforced?
Ajit's insights are strongly linked with what's happening on the ground. It leads us to think of the permanent state of emergency. It's not just a phrase, it's actually a lived reality. When basic essentials like antibiotics, seizure meds, and even insulin are often unavailable, every single day becomes a balancing act. Healthcare providers are forced to make tough calls about who gets what limited care there is.
Right, and these restrictions go beyond physical shortages. There's a psychological weight on healthcare providers and patients alike. For instance, the absence of cutting edge medical equipment and the use of manual tools during surgeries highlight the blockade's systematic erosion of healthcare capabilities.
The access to basic standard of care treatment is always limited, and it's because people cannot move between town and town. They cannot leave Gaza to enter Israel, for example, where Israel have the first world healthcare system. When we look at colonial structure, it's not only about limiting access to resources, but it's also controlling the very ability of the population to function independently. So this blockade prevent the development of any local industries and limit the export of goods, stifle economic development, limit movement in and out, who can get out of Gaza and who comes.
And it actually paints a stark picture of inequality. The blockade's control over movement and resources not only undermines healthcare, but also entrenches a broader structure of dependency. The ICC's language of such violations to persecution as a crime against humanity is particularly relevant here. How does the systematic denial of healthcare rights reshape international legal interpretation?
And these rights also frame the blockade as a tool for colonial control, designed to stifle Gaza's ability to self-sufficient. This aligns with scholarly critiques of state of exception, a framework that perpetuates crises to justify prolonged restrictions.
Yes, it shows how systematic these restrictions are, making people in Gaza have to start from scratch over and over because of the erosion of facilities.
That's right, and the structural limitations don't just impact resources or training, they affect the standard of care, like infection control. They are often forced to use manual tools for surgeries because power is unreliable. These basic items are controlled and monitored by Israeli forces on the foundation of the blockade, severely impacting daily life and the extent to which basic humanitarian aid can be provided to them.
And that also spill into the healthcare sectors. The people in Gaza and in the healthcare sector in particular, they don't have access to the cutting edge medical equipment, especially in time of war. Like, and whatever capacity they have built over the years, now it's destroyed. Even a piece of paper to write what's going on, we did not have access to it. Um, so electronic health record, there were no access for it. And even the paper form, we were running out of papers to write reports between.
This lack of digital infrastructure is a significant issue. Not having reliable records affects continuity of care, especially in emergencies or shift changes. When providers don't have access to updated patient information, it's easy for things to slip through the cracks, especially under the stress of limited resources.
And this isn't just about wartime. As she mentioned, even during so-called peacetime, people in Gaza are still trapped under these restrictions. Children needing specialized care, like radiation or heart surgeries, are routinely denied exit permits due to periodic or security issues. So there's this constant denial of basic healthcare rights, even outside of immediate conflict.
It's a powerful reminder that for Gazans, these barriers are deeply entrenched in everyday life. Asma's insights underscore that healthcare in Gaza isn't just underfunded or strained, it's systematically undermined. This blockade doesn't just limit medical resources, it erodes dignity, autonomy, and very foundations of healthcare.
This new normal idea of Gaza's perpetual state of crisis demands further exploration. If international actors fail to intervene meaningfully, how can such cycles ever be broken? Advocacy must go beyond addressing immediate needs to challenge the systems enabling these crises.
As we include this episode, let's summarize some key takeaways. The blockade on Gaza continues to have devastating effects on the humanitarian situation, impacting healthcare access and the delivery of aid.
Both Ajit and Asma have emphasized the need for advocacy, accountability, and the importance of maintaining a focus on human rights.
We encourage our listeners to engage with these issues and advocate for policies that prioritize humanitarian needs and uphold human rights in conflict zones.
Thank you for joining us today on Beyond the Barrier, Navigating Gaza's Blockade and its Humanitarian Impact. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.